Hello, everybody, and welcome to the reality show brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK, where we bring the practical philosophy of objectivism into the world and apply it to the problems of life and to current events. And today we have a great panel here to discuss three articles that I found very interesting. Some of the folks on the panel are just getting these articles and reading through them, so we're going to hold their commentary off till the end. But the first topic comes to us from Thomas Friedman, a writer for the New York Times, who wrote an article criticizing Biden and the Saudi Arabian government for a proposed normalization agreement with Israel. His justification is something like this, quote, "You cannot have normalization with an Israeli government that is not normal. It will never be a stable U.S. ally or Saudi partner, and right now, Israel's government is not normal." What do you think of this? As far as I'm concerned, just a thumbnail, it's the most normal government in that region. So I think his premise is way off, and we'll discuss why that's so. He also used the phrase "useful idiots" to apply to Biden and the Saudi crown prince, for being tools, I guess, of Benjamin Netanyahu's political policies. We'll get into that as much as we can. Second article is a general police walkout, armed police walkout happened, I guess, in the UK following the murder charges potentially filed against the officer who killed this kid, Chris Kaba, a construction worker. Now the incident, the context of the shooting is very interesting. The walkout is interesting. And I'd be interested in what the panel thinks about this, whether this was a justified killing, whether the murder charges seem valid or not, whether the police should, armed police should walk out in an industrial protest, is what they called it, because they're legally bound not to strike, but they sort of did. I'd be interested in everybody's opinion on that. It's a very interesting issue. That's the context of the murder, and I think we just have the two topics today, unless I'm mistaken. Maybe I'm wrong. Who wants to let me throw it out there to Robert first? What do you think about Benjamin Netanyahu? What do you think about this whole deal with the Saudis and an attempt to normalize relations? And what do you think of Friedman's commentary on the attempt at normalizing relations between these countries in the Middle East?
Yeah, I think Netanyahu is Israel's Kissinger. He is so about the real politic that he's completely unable to see the principles involved. And to the extent that the United States signs on to that, I can see why Friedman uses the expression "useful idiots." Maybe he can get away with that more because we are talking, after all, about Joe Biden, who has not been great on this. It's interesting that Friedman had an article today, an editorial in which he thinks Biden's actually really smart and really cagey. Bottom line is, you can't solve the problem in Israel. It just can't be solved. And the only thing to do is either stand on principle or give in and accept a two-state solution. Some very smart people, including Friedman, Christopher Hitchens was another, who was a big fan of the two-state solution. Look, there's no good way to resolve the issues there unless you give the Palestinians their own country, their own state. I don't know a better answer than that, except
but the Palestinians aren't. But the Palestinians
by either side.
Yeah, the Palestinians aren't for a two-state solution.
Yeah, either side.
That's just an incremental. Well, I think the Jewish state has offered them those kinds of solutions in the past, and they've refused them from their founding on. So it's clear the Palestinians might use a two-state solution to temporarily gain ground and to gain some political leverage, but it's not their final goal. Their goal is to make the entire state of Israel a Palestinian state.
Right. Now, my idea of a solution is a one-state solution.
Yes.
And that means ending the West Bank as its own administrative state, ending the Gaza Strip as its own administrative state, and for Israel to drop being a Jewish state and simply to be a state that is obviously majority Jewish, but a liberty state. And then to say, look, here's the way this country is going to be. If you want to stick around, great. We will respect your property rights. We will respect your individual rights, but you don't get to be a separate quote unquote state.
Well,
That's
wait,
the only answer that I see.
does this mean that Jews couldn't come there for a sanctuary? It could still be a sanctuary state for
Sure.
Jews. You're just saying it would no longer be a religious state bound to the Jewish religion.
Just like there are countries that tend to be primarily uh, Catholic or whatever religion, it's not going to be the official policy of the government. And yes, by all means, it will continue to be a place that Jewish people will go to, and for compelling reasons. Same as Islamic people will go to certain places because it's associated with the religion. That should not be associated or a function of or officially an aspect of that state. The solution to this two-state problem is a one-state, which is not a Jewish state, not by government.
Jonathan Honig, what do you say to all this?
Well, I've been to Israel, Mark. I know you have as well, and found it so fascinating, so exciting, such a benevolent, amazing place. I've been there 3 times just the last decade. And what I hear when I hear this criticism of Netanyahu, who is a bad politician, I hear that as just being a way to kind of smuggle in my mind, hatred and distaste for Israel writ large. It seems like an effort to not only disparage Israel, but also somehow to equate Israel with Saudi Arabia. In my mind, these are 2 completely different entities altogether. I mean, as I said, Netanyahu is a bad politician, but Israel is not a bad country. It is the only worthy country in the Middle East. I mean, I look at the Middle East, and again, I've only been to Israel. Actually, I've been to Morocco as well. I guess I don't know if you'd consider that the Middle East, but I mean, if you're into individual rights, it's a cesspool. Even Saudi Arabia, which always looks so gleaming and normal. I mean, this is a backward theocratic monarchy that is just, it's so unbelievably backward. It's almost amazing that something like that still exists here and now. So it's so primitive. I don't trust it. I would never go there. I would never sign a treaty with Saudi Arabia, or probably even people operating in Saudi Arabia. But I think Israel is the good guy in the situation. And it reminds me of something that Miss Rand said in the Donahue interview, one of the Donahue interviews. And someone asked her, you all remember this, I know, but for our audience, they should look it up. Someone asked her about basically, who do you support, the Israelis or the Arabs? And Miss Rand said, if you mean whose side you should be on, Israel or the Arabs, I would certainly say Israel, because it is the advanced, technologically civilized country who against an almost culturally primitive savages who have not changed for years and who are racist and who resent Israel because it is bringing industry and intelligence and technology into their nation. That was 40 years ago, and they've continued to do that. I mean, if you look at Israel, it is thriving, and not because they're just now allowing women to drive.
Yeah, so I believe in a one-state solution too. I don't. What do you think about making it a secular state, as Robert says? Now, it primarily is a secular state, but there is definitely a huge subsidized population of conservative and Orthodox religious folks who live off of the government dole rather than join the army. And they do create some political problems because they are a powerful faction within the Knesset, and they have a lot of undue political influence, I think, and they do drive some of this conflict. Do you think a one-state solution is the way to go? And what do you think about making it a secular state, not a Jewish state, a place where Jews can go for asylum if they need to, but not specifically a Jewish state?
Well, I mean, if you're asking me, I just, as I said, when I was in Israel, I didn't observe a quote Jewish state. I observed what felt like, San Francisco, something very modern, something very hip, something very interesting. There was prayer around, but there was no mandated or forced prayers, and people weren't there weren't the little religious morality priests going around and saying, wait a minute, you're not wearing the right clothing. I mean, this was fundamentally a free country. So, I mean, look, America is still, in my mind, a work in progress. We're still striving to be free, an individualistic country. And Israel is continuing to do that as well. And to the extent that it can do that, it's going to continue succeeding. I mean, when it was really socialist, it failed. That's when they had all the runaway inflation. It was a terrible, in my opinion, a really terrible time to be in Israel. The more individualistic they've become, the more capitalist, the more free, and the more successful. I hope I hope America go in that direction.
I couldn't agree with you more. John, do you think that this is for Wazart, John?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't want to interrupt, but I want to welcome a new member to our super chat, Elftiji. Thank you for being a member.
Elftiji. Okay, yes. Thank you very much. I forgot what I was going to say now. John, what do you think about this? Do you think that Israel is not a normal state? What's Thomas Friedman's point of view? Is there any validity to it? We hear a lot today for the anti-Zionist folks, the anti-Israel folks. They claim that Israel is an apartheid state. I think that's of course false, but they claim this. And should the Palestinians have any place at the negotiating table when it comes to normalizing relations in the Middle East?
I don't know about not having a place. I mean, they probably have to have some place, but at the same time, they have done acts of terrorism many times. So I don't know if you should be appeasing that anyway, because I do believe in a one-state solution as well. And I agree with Robert that it could be made more secular. I think it is more secular than the rest of the Mideast by leaps and bounds, but it still is a state-supported religion when you look at all the little details and the way they speak and everything. And I think secularizing it more would be better, but I just don't see that happening with the people that run that country right now. So I just think overall the deal that is trying to be made is pretty bad, and not for the reasons that Friedman is saying. But no one else but Saudi Arabia seems to be getting anything out of this deal. They want a defense pact from us, and they want to be allowed to enrich uranium for supposed civilian nuclear program. But then the only thing they have to give back is promising that they're not going to work with China and Russia and that they're going to be nicer to Israel, basically. Well, that sounds like a lose-lose situation, because Saudi Arabia, I don't trust them at all, at least their government. And, this would just leave us in a weaker position in the area. And it also gives more credit and credence to Saudi Arabia, which I don't even think we should be allies with at all anyway. So
you sort of agree with Biden in that respect. I have to agree with Biden in that respect too. Saudi Arabia is a disgusting country. But now, Linda, in the politics of nation statism, which I think is, as maybe Robert may have suggested, is sort of the Kissinger-esque way of looking at things. Iran is trying to fill a power vacuum there that Bush made possible. And Saudi Arabia sees the threat from Iran. And I guess it's in America's interest to keep Iran and Saudi Arabia from binding together, and to keep Saudi Arabia away from the Chinese and the Russians, who clearly don't have our interests in their heart, and to maybe even arm them to be the next state counter to Iran, the next local besides Israel. And that could be fairly formidable in a certain way. Do you think there's any credence to that, or is that just more pragmatic politicking that hurts us down the road?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you kind of lost me at Biden anyway, and trusting Biden to do anything, but I said Biden called out Saudi Arabia, and I think he was right to do that. He might not have known that he was right doing it. It might have just been, an impulsive brain fart on his side, but it sort of worked. He might not have known that he did that. I think that's kind of where we're at with Biden these days. As far as Friedman and the whole useful idiot comment, I mean, he just comes across as completely condescending anyway. And supposedly he's closely read by Biden, according to the article. The whole thing to me, and I wished I'd had more time to digest the article, but I'm on the side of single state. How secular Israel could be is questionable. I don't know if that's something we'll see in our lifetimes, but yeah, I just needed more time to read the article. So I'm in agreement with most of what the guys are saying.
So Robert, what would ideal diplomacy, quote unquote, look like for us with respect to the Middle East? What should our position be? Who should we ally with? And who should we factor out of any agreements?
I think it's as much about what we say as what we do. What we do is support Israel by no half measures. We should absolutely and 100% support Israel. What that means in regard to supporting Netanyahu is a different question, but we should be 100% in support of Israel. What we say, on the other hand, which I think will be as important, arguably more important, is that we are in favor of Israel continuing to be the most free country in the area and to be even more free by adopting a fully consistent liberty platform, and then moving in the direction of making those administrative states that are both part of Israel and somehow not part of Israel, part of the country, with absolute protection of the rights of everybody living in those areas.
Okay, I'm not sure how that's going to happen given the ideological bent of the Palestinian movement. But Jonathan, what's that?
I was just going to say, that's why there's a difference between the support that we give and the words that we use. The words we use have to be in favor of the principles and in favor of the long term. But in the short term, you're right, that's not practical. What's practical is we support Israel 102%.
I mean, look,
what about
Robert is much more well-versed in like the intra politics than I am. And I would just like to see the eradication of this egalitarianism that, oh, well, there's Saudi Arabia has a society and America has a society. We all got a society. I mean, I think we should, as a country, and I think our country's leaders should speak out and say, this is terrible. Like a country where the press has no freedom, there's a monarchy, with women and people are subjugated. This isn't how humans are supposed to live. We should speak out, I think, against this and not sanction it, not kind of, look, it's nothing to do militarily, but kind of use the bully pulpit, if you will, of the being the most free government to not go dance with the sheiks. Every elected official seems to want to go over there and dance with the sheiks like it's something, I would never participate in that. I would never be, caught dead in that type of environment. So speak out against these backward, in my opinion, primitive, barbaric third world cultures. Doesn't matter how many skyscrapers they are. The way they view human beings is so awful that it shouldn't be sanctioned by any American official, in my opinion.
And ultimately self-destructive, if you think about it. Who cares if Saudi Arabia gets together with China and Russia? I mean, to me, the premises of all these countries are anti-life and will eventually be very destructive to them. We're seeing it now in China, who are once supposed to be the biggest enemies to the United States, but at the same time experiencing a demographic collapse, a financial collapse. The house of cards is crumbling as we speak, which to me is why the Chinese are reaching out and trying to extend their influence further, because they're dying on a lot of different levels, and they're trying to maintain power that they don't have. And the same reason Russia's reaching out to these allies, because they've been exposed in the Ukrainian war as being a paper bear. And so each is trying to build up their cachet with the rest of the world. And who cares if they get together? They're not going to be powerful in the long term. In the long term, they're just going to eat themselves up. John, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think the reason that the current establishment is afraid of them getting together is because they know that we're not going to stand up for ourselves. So them getting together is worst case scenario for people that are morally weak.
I also think it comes from a misconception of what evil is, and I think Rand was unique in her concepts that evil is actually parasitic. It's weak. It's the virtuous. It's the heroic that are actually the atlases of the world that these folks rely on for their subsistence. And when that goes away, they go away. If we didn't treat them as equally powerful as a rational society, then we would have nothing to fear from them.
Some outreach, maybe I don't mean to cut in, but like some outreach to like youth in the Middle East and imploring them to make some change in terms of how they want to be governed moving forward. I mean, what my memory of the late Soviet Union was that a lot of Russian kids wanted to have Pepsi and McDonald's, and they wanted to have a Western lifestyle. So, I remember Obama basically doing nothing during the Arab Spring in terms of supporting those who are trying to rise up. So, again, use that bully pulpit and try to exemplify individualism, Americanism, freedom for the rest of the world to see.
Well, and if you look at it and as another example of our cowardice of how we'll handle it is our practical silence on the Iran protests about the the morality police or whatever they were called.
Very good. It's closing.
We had a perfect opportunity there to grab some of those young people, exactly like you're saying, Jonathan, and it was completely overlooked and almost ignored by the establishment. You know, a few people said some things. I heard some politicians say some good things, but it was far and few between. And so that's the kind of thing I mean is
Senator
cowards like that, then they are afraid that they get together because we know we're not going to stand up for ourselves or for the people that deserve to be stood up for.
It's ironic. It's ironic that while American intellectuals were trying to embrace the hijab as a form of beautiful, independent religious self-expression, women in the Middle East, particularly Iran, were taking them off in public to be arrested, by the way, to be arrested and whisked off into the vacuum of the morality police.
And even beaten to death.
Indeed. And we abandoned them in their actual protest and missed an opportunity to win people over in that region who really do want to be free. And they do have something, a standard to measure it by. I mean, you know, in the 50s or so, even though they had the Shah, it wasn't the best thing in the world. It was certainly much better than what they have today, because women could still be attorneys and doctors and teachers and have fairly full lives. So it seems like the panel has agreed that we don't like Netanyahu as a politician, but we understand Israel to be the most free state in that region. We think this deal with everybody in the Middle East is a pragmatic political solution that won't solve things long term. It's getting in bed with the bad guys, and as usual, that casts aspersions on the United States. It makes us look like unprincipled folks, and then we get the blame for lots of the trouble that goes on in the world because we have abandoned our principles. They're not abandoning theirs. We're abandoning ours. So we should stay away from this alliance, get some energy independence, promote Israel as a free society, and let the evil countries destroy themselves in their own alliances. Is that a fair assessment of what the panel may be thinking?
Yep.
Exactly.
All right, folks. Well, enough of Thomas Friedman. He's taken up too much of our time. There was a very interesting case in the UK where an officer shot a kid named Chris Kaba, and lots of Metropolitan Police officers in London handed in their firearms when this charge was announced. I guess in solidarity or protest because they don't feel they can do their jobs adequately. They don't want to be legally hampered in doing their jobs. Did you guys read the context around this kid's shooting? Does it seem suspicious to you? It seemed really suspicious to me. Linda, what was your impressions from this?
Something's missing. There, between the context and what the police officers did, there's this big gap. And while, you know, the actual event of the shooting, I'm not even sure that all of that got told, but the way it's told in that article, I mean, it doesn't seem like this kid was doing anything wrong except driving the wrong car that was involved in something else earlier.
Let me provide some context for anybody who's watching and is not familiar with the story. Apparently, this kid, a construction worker who was a few days away from being a father, was driving the car, not his, it was a borrowed car, and that car was associated with some kind of gun crime. He was being tailed by a police officer. When he turned down a side street, another police officer had barricaded the road. Apparently, he T-boned him, ran into him, and a sniper from the unit following him shot him dead through the car window. It doesn't seem like there was any opportunity for the kid to get out, to be arrested, to sort out the situation. I don't know whether he was trying to escape and the vehicle had become a dangerous weapon and they felt they had to stop him. You're right, Linda. There seems to be a lot of pieces of this puzzle missing that I don't quite understand. Did you get that same impression, Jonathan Honig?
Well, I mean, I didn't, to Linda's credit and to the rest of your credit, I actually didn't go into the nuances of the story that detail. And I was thinking more of the idea of the police force going on strike. And what do the rest of us who are law-abiding citizens do when the police force goes on strike like that? And how necessary, Yaron Brook always talks about government as a necessary good. Libertarians always, it's a government, necessary evil, but what a necessary good it is. And, Rand and the nature of government, Rand talks about, the role, what's the role of government? And a police is such a big, important part of it. And I feel great empathy, at least here in the States, for the police. I think they have a very difficult job. You've got a lot of non-objective crime. This is a very specific circumstance you were describing. I hope it's investigated very thoroughly. And maybe there were bad decisions made, and maybe there are a few bad apples on the force, but I don't think that police are inherently bad. I wish they were better trained and better equipped, and I wish there was more objective laws so that they wouldn't be involved in drug crime, immigrations, etc. But I think it's a really difficult, tough time to be a police officer. They don't know what they face, and I have a lot of empathy on either side of the pond.
Robert, did you think?
But I'm wondering if the reason that they went, and it's hard not to read this into things these days, is it racially motivated? Were they afraid of what would happen if, in fact, this shooting, which appears to be that it shouldn't have happened. I mean, the kid didn't get out of his car. He didn't do anything. There were no lights, no sirens. He didn't see anything coming. And is the stand down to prevent rioting?
Oh, I don't know, Robert. What do you think of this crazy scenario?
Well, I think I had the same reaction when I first read the news stories. And yeah, this is outrageous. And as Linda seemed to suggest, it really doesn't make any sense. It's beyond outrageous. Like, what the hell? And then I look into the background. Kaba had been charged in 2018 with possessing an imitation firearm with the intent to cause fear of violence in relation to an incident in 2017. Incidentally, the incident we're talking about was in 2022, a little over a year ago. So that gives you some idea of these numbers. We call him a kid, and to me, anybody in their 20s is still a kid, but he wasn't a kid. He was found guilty back in 2019, sentenced to 4 years in a Young Offenders Institute, released in 2021. In the months following his death, 6 men were charged with conspiring with Kaba to commit murder and grievous bodily harms. And then going further a little bit to the incident, Kaba's driving an Audi, not registered to him, being followed by an unmarked police car. The Audi was believed by police to have been linked to a firearms incident the day before. Kaba made a left turn on that day into Kirkstall Gardens. A marked armed response vehicle was waiting. Police vehicles were said by witnesses to have boxed the car in, and witnesses claimed that Kaba ignored repeated orders to get out of the vehicle and was trying to ram the Audi through the roadblock. Armed officers exited their vehicles, approached the Audi on foot. According to the IOPC, a police officer fired a single round at Kaba through the car's windscreen, striking him. Now you're hearing this is a little different than the stories where they said a sharpshooter.
Yes,
as if you're imagining him far away and brought him in just to kill this guy. He was taken to a nearby, you assumed he died right away. No, he was taken to a nearby hospital where he died of his injuries the following day. Now, I'm not saying this changes the story and that, oh, okay, now he's a bad guy. But so much of this was left out of the news stories that it's really hard when you read the Guardian to just not be completely outraged. I still think that obviously this may have been a completely improper action on the police part, but it's not what it looks like from the news stories at all. And so my reaction is, yeah, we got to wait this out, find out what the conclusion of the investigation is. Now, do I think the police should have gone on strike because the officer was being questioned, detained, thrown off of the police force, whatever it was? Obviously not. And I don't think that's the kind of action that should take place. But yeah, there was definitely more to the story than we were given through the news.
For you, Robert, for doing the research, because the only thing we had to go off of this morning was the article about what happened with police, and then what the BBC had reported on that, selective reporting, obviously, because reading just that article, it's a totally different story. Thank you for the perspective.
Yeah, and again, I don't mean to say that Kaba was necessarily guilty. He certainly should not have been killed during this event. But it's a little less of a jaw drop or a complete confusion when you get the full context. It may be that this was wrongful death and that the police need to be held to account. There will probably be a substantial settlement associated with it, but it wasn't what the stories made it out to be.
But according to what you found out, there was communication between the police officers and Cabo. He was asked to get out of his vehicle. The story that we read, none of that took place.
Right. And whether just him ramming into the police vehicles and all of the other suspicion that there were firearms related to a previous day's events, whether that was enough of a reason for the police to take a shot at him. Again, it wasn't a sharpshooter behind a fence or on a hill. It was a police officer approaching him from the front of the vehicle.
Well, I'm not sure I believe sharpshooter anymore, right? So if he's ramming police vehicles, is that self-defense now on the part of the police officer?
Well, of course, it becomes it becomes a lethal weapon, and they might have to use lethal force against somebody like that. That's certainly not the way the context provided to us made it seem, or the article. The article made it seem that he was being tailed because he was in a car that didn't belong to his, that was associated with some kind of gun incident the previous day, that he turned down a street and was blocked. And it seemed like he accidentally ran into the other car and was boxed in, and didn't do in the shot. I got the sense, I didn't say this necessarily, that the shot came very soon after. Like there was no discussion that there was a conversation taking place between the police officers and the perp there, that he was continuously ramming the other vehicle in an attempt to escape the barricade. That's why we were like, there's got to be something missing from this equation, because it's just too open and shut the way. Now, was that article from The Guardian?
The original article was from The Guardian, but the Times and The Independent had very different reporting on it.
That's just unfortunate. I can't help but think that when The Guardian leaves out that much information, they're trying to gin people up with an agenda. It's not even about the news anymore. How frightening is that?
It reminds me, just say one thing, in one of Dr. Peikoff's, he was a podcast, he was asked about context, and his quote that always stays in my mind is, he said something to the effect of, out of context, anyone can prove anything. And so thank you, Mark and Robert, for emphasizing the importance of knowing the context and not just going off the headline.
Yeah,
well, there's nothing in that article that talks about his previous record. Nothing.
No,
nothing. It was like this innocent man.
Yeah, in fact, it emphasizes his coming fatherhood, that he was a construction worker. It makes him seem like an upright, upstanding, innocent citizen that was ambushed.
He was even studying architecture. It's interesting, though. I've got to say, if any of our regular UK hosts were on, they'd probably be telling us, well, this is like putting the New York Times up against the New York Post. Of course, the Guardian did this, and of course, the Telegraph would be better, and of course, but not being from the UK, it is striking how different the perspective was from the different news outlets.
John, what do you think about it? You in the same opinion as the rest of us?
Yeah, basically. I mean, this is one of those stories where you have to read it from multiple sources probably and just wait. And the fact that it's so confusing and really unclear what actually happened is more justification that charges should be brought and let a court or judges or jury look at everything that happened and tell us what happened. And so that the police went on strike just makes me think that all of them read this article from The Guardian and took it at face value, and that their jobs are in trouble, so we better all strike. But if they knew the whole story, maybe they wouldn't have, or, maybe if they understood how confusing the story is, maybe they wouldn't have gone on strike. Because I could understand them feeling from that article that the reason they were charged was just pressure from the protests. And that would be a legitimate concern for the police to have, is if anytime anyone protests something, they're going to come after the police. I would be concerned about my job too, but that's not actually what looks like what happened. So I don't know. It just depends on what gang has control of the narrative in the thing that you're reading.
It's irresponsible journalism, either from the side of who wrote it. I mean, for somebody who studied journalism many years ago, but I mean, there seems to be so much less integrity in journalism today. And whether it was the person who wrote the article or the person who edited and cut it down for space, they should be ashamed of that article.
Yeah, don't cut out essentials, folks. For you people editing articles, don't cut out essentials, because you cut out the context, and then we cannot make up our minds about what's going on. There's a book out, I think, called the Art of the Smear, maybe, that talks about how in the United States, political action committees now serve as the source of news for the AP, for the New York Times, for the Washington Times. People are now going to political spin organizations for their base news. That should trouble everyone. The journalistic community, the news community is like the brain of society. It needs to be perceiving correctly. It needs to be integrating that information correctly and passing it on to us. Otherwise, we can't act correctly.
And there's lazy journalism. I was just the victim of that with the gallery. There was an article that was written for an upcoming event. And as I'm reading through the article, there were numerous errors. But the most egregious one, I get to the bottom where I supposedly said something and I went, I didn't say that. I wouldn't even say anything close to that. So I copy pasted, threw it into Google. And this was something she lifted from another article from a not respected source and credited me with it. I mean, it was just lazy reporting.
So, a reporter has a bone to pick with you because maybe they sense that you don't think the way they do and they would rather smear you, put you in your place. I don't know. It's whatever it is. It's not actual journalism. They're not giving us the facts and letting us judge for ourselves. That's for sure. Well, folks, we had a third topic, which I couldn't see because the print was so small on my email that I missed it, but I'm going to bring it up now because it's, I think, one of the most interesting topics. It's a Japanese man has claimed he is trans age. So he's identifying as a 28-year-old despite being 39. Well, he could just do it. He could just say he's 39 forever, right? Isn't that what we Americans could do? So now for transgender, I'm reading this straight from the suggested email here. Whilst for transgender people, we might understandably want to respect their wish to be called a certain pronoun, there seems to be something blatantly subjective about claiming you are trans age. Now, what do you think about this story? What is it? What do you have to say about what triggered him to be trans age? I thought it was very interesting. And is it right that there is something deeply subjectivist about the ideas of transness or something else, or is something else going on here? Who wants to weigh in on this crazy topic?
I mean, I'll jump in because frankly, I was a little embarrassed that this was newsworthy. Again, we get back to the bad journalism and slow news day. What are we going to talk about? And, women have been doing this for years, right? 29. I'm the X number anniversary of my 29th birthday. I mean, you can feel however old you are. And I think people are doing that. I don't think it's newsworthy. Now, what are they saying that 60 is the new 40? There's so many different, and I'm going with that because I'm 59. But I just think the fact that this is considered newsworthy.
No. They've been saying that. Everyone's been saying that, oh, I'm really just 29, but they haven't had it like put on their driver's license. And isn't that part of what this movement is? It's not just to, say I'm a few years younger than I am.
No, he says on legal documents, he's using his real age. And that's what I think makes this ridiculous.
I don't think he is actually. I think it said that he wasn't using. It says he also shared that while he maintains his actual age in official documents and resumes, he navigates other facets of his daily life as a 28-year-old man. So look,
there is such a thing as biological age and chronological age, right? You can actually do tests to figure out how your cells are aging, what's going on with you internally. You could have the metabolic system of a 28-year-old and be 39. But this is not what this guy is adhering to. It's something else that is guiding him to claim that he is 28 years old. Robert, do you want to comment a little on this?
This is primus.
Yeah. Reading the story, I took it as a lot lighter, and it seems like it's silly. I think though of the examples of this sad, tragic, horrible woman who decided she saw herself as being a blind person and actually put chemicals in her eyes to blind herself. This is extreme body dysphoria. This guy is just saying, look, I don't feel like a 39-year-old. I feel like a 28-year-old. He's keeping his real age on his documents. This is more like performance art. And if it wasn't for the trans phenomenon, we'd probably all say, oh yeah, that's silly, but I know the feeling. I'm not in my 20s anymore, but I still feel like a kid. It's really just one more way to point out you may call yourself something, and you may really feel that you are something, but if you're not, you're not. Objectivity matters. I took this story as very light, again, because he's not lying on official documents. He's just putting it out there that I consider myself to be 28. But it does exactly give us an example of those even worse cases where somebody feels, I don't feel that this limb is mine and I need to chop off my left arm. These crazy things that can happen. And it's a good reminder that you can't or shouldn't fight reality. You can't fight reality and win. This guy eventually is going to have to accept that I am the age that I am. And as he gets older, he's going to run into some of the challenges of those of us in our 50s run into, 60s run into, whatever age it is. I don't care how you feel. You are what you are.
His epitaph should be interesting.
Well, there's a point at which, when he keeps saying he's 28 and he's 62, people are going to say, "Oh, you're rode hard and put away wet, buddy." Jonathan, what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I didn't interrupt. I mean, to me, this is exactly what Miss Rand talked about in terms of primacy of consciousness, primacy of existence. Existence exists. You have been on Earth X number of years. That is a fact, an unmutable fact. And how you feel or think doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. And it's great if you feel younger, you take care of yourself. Maybe even you wink, nod, and tell your friends you're really good. If that's kind of how you want to evade reality to live your life, that's fine. But, this is not the primacy of consciousness where whatever you think is reality. It's the primacy of existence, and A is A. This is just kind of funny example of, once again, how that seems so foreign to many people today, the idea that reality is what it is. They want to make it up in their heads as they go along.
Yeah, this is pretty scary. I mean, when I see the left trying to impose their will on all of us, it in part comes from this idea that they know what's right, and they've got it worked out in their minds a certain way, that if only the world would be like this, if only the world would fit this image, well, let's make the world into that to fit our image. It's total primacy of consciousness going through our political system. I mean, Robert, what do you make of this, and how can we get ourselves out of this, I think, self-destructive way of looking at the world?
I think this Japanese guy, he's actually showing us the way, which is he's saying, I'm trans age. Well, you can say that's making a mockery of the transsexual phenomenon. And in a way it is, but it's also showing the way. Trans men, they're not men. They're trans men. And there's nothing wrong with being a trans man if you are willing to say, this is what I am. I'm this guy. I'm biologically a woman, but I'm a trans man. The problem is when you say trans men are men, trans women are women, and then try to force everybody else's mind to accept that unreality. But as Jonathan points out, existence comes first. Existence has primacy. So when this Japanese guy says, hey, I'm 28 years old, and he's still writing that he's 39 on every document that really matters, he's, in a way, he's showing the way to the trans community to say, look, cut it out. You are what you are. You can call yourself what you want, and more important, you can live how you want, but you can't lie about reality. It's why I kind of like this story, because it's very light, it's very silly, and it's not about lying about your age, just like trans people shouldn't be lying about their biological status.
Well, and I don't think that, he doesn't actually say I am 28. He's identifying as 28, right? I mean, I'm 59 years old. Do I feel 59? Do I remember what I thought a 59-year-old looked like, acted when I was a kid, when I was in my 20s? It was kind of frightening to think that somebody would, be that old. So while I am actually 59, there's a lot of times I act a lot younger than that, and many times even younger than that. But it doesn't change the fact. A is A. I'm 59. He's 38.
And the fact that this guy is using the trans language, I think it's revealing. I think that says something to those who regard that idea of transitioned as having some status above and beyond what it really is. So no, you call yourself what you want, live how you want. Don't try to claim that you are transcending reality, that you've made this quote unquote transition. No, trans age, it's about as realistic as transsexual. I'm all for people living how they want. Don't try to tell me that changes reality, that changes existence. So, more power to our 28-year-old, 39-year-old friend here.
Jonathan, are you on that same page?
I mean, look,
do you think that this is light and friendly?
I hear the same justification for religion. No offense, Robert, but that sense of like, hey, you know what? If it ends up being that it's not so bad, and you get together with people, it's like, you know, I don't see, for me, the value in evading reality and telling yourself something that isn't true. Yes, it's great, Linda, as you said, if you feel younger, if you think, oh, I'd rather be with people who are younger, but to say I am an age that I'm not, and to tell other people I'm actually 29 when you're 39, and to put any effort into deceiving reality at all, I don't see a value in it. I don't see how it can be good. But you know, to me, it's just like I don't really get it. But you know, people gotta live their lives and make whatever, you know, absurd, corrupt decisions they want to make along the way.
Just to put a little bit more context on his actual reasoning, because yeah, I agree with you, Jonathan, but he seems to be doing this out of some kind of protest against Japanese culture. He says that he believes that Japanese society tends to place a premium on accumulated experience, and he views actual age as a mere record of years passed since birth, arguing that it doesn't define one's abilities or achievements. So
this really performance art.
What?
This really was performance art, like Robert said. This was a big statement.
It's bizarre in a way. Then and why would he go younger? Why not older if he thinks that there's a premium on accumulated experience? And rather than saying that, you know, he says just that age doesn't dictate these specific little things. You can be younger and have more experience than an older person that hasn't done anything or tried anything in their life. So instead of saying that, he's like, oh, well, I'm just going to be a 28-year-old, as if a 38-year-old can't act like a 28-year-old, like in their physical habits or their health or, you know, their interests or whatever.
Well, he can identify as a cat, but that doesn't make him a cat. He doesn't have 4 legs and a tail.
It's very concrete bound almost, that a 28-year-old must act this way, and therefore I'm 28 years old. Well, but as our technology and our everything gets better, our concept or perception of age really changes. I mean, look at the older people than me 30 years ago look very different than older people than me now, with just the way we can take care of ourselves like we never have before, and we're living longer. And I mean, even young people, you look back 100 years ago on what young people were expected to do compared to now, it's like no ages are ever the same as society progresses.
Yes, I agree with you. That is a truth. I don't know that this guy's touching on it, but he's definitely getting us talking about it. So perhaps that's a good thing. Christopher Smith with $2.99 Canadian. Thank you, folks. Well, guys, I think we've come to the end of the session today.
If I could just say one more thing,
yes.
Thinking about what Jonathan said, my initial reaction was, this guy is not committing the moral, psychological, philosophical crime that we think he is. But the more I think about it, I think Jonathan's making a great point. He is still committing a philosophical crime. It's not anything like what the transsexuals are doing. It's simply, no, you be who you are, be what you are, be out about that. Tell people you feel like you're 28, but don't live the lie. So Jonathan, thank you for your insights on that. I think I agree with you.
You look, you know, have them say, oh my gosh, you're 59, but you're so active. You look like a 32-year-old, whatever. I mean, you know, it's, as you said, Robert, I mean, be who you are, embrace who you are.
I'm good with that.
Folks,
thank you.
Tell the truth, folks, not just for other people, but it's vital to you that you are honest. It's a virtue, and a very selfish virtue. On that note, folks, there's no announcements for any shows today, but do join us tomorrow on The Reality Show. We may be the same panel, we may be different, but we will be discussing interesting issues from an objectivist point of view. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, like and subscribe, spread the word. And while you're doing that, always remember to check your premises. Peace.